Evil is not always loud. It doesn't always wear horns or wave a red flag. Often, evil walks silently beside us, calm, smiling, familiar. It blends and hides in plain sight, and only reveals itself when it feels threatened, particularly when you finally recognize what it truly is. And once you do, everything changes. But what happens when the manipulators and narcissists, the quietly cruel, realize you've seen through them? They don't apologize. They don't retreat. They respond with calculated behavior meant to protect their illusion and regain control. This video explores 7 subtle but chilling signs that a person begins to show when they know their mask has slipped, all viewed to the lens of Stoic philosophy, which teaches us to confront such realities with clarity, calm, and courage. Evil isn't easy to define because it's not always visible in deeds. It doesn't always wear a label. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, you must understand what underlies appearances and respect that. We try to define evil as cruelty, immorality, or harm, but those are subjective. What seems cruel to one may seem justified to another. That's why evil is easier felt than defined. Sometimes your heart knows long before your mind catches up. Something in your body tenses. Your instincts whisper, and you feel a presence that doesn't align with kindness. What's most frightening is that evil doesn't always live in the shadows. It can live in homes, classrooms, pulpits, cloaked in familiarity. That's what makes it dangerous. Stoic philosophy doesn't ask us to label people as good or bad, but rather to understand human nature and protect our inner peace from being broken by external chaos. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, believe that we cannot control others, only our perception and our response. So when confronted with toxic, harmful, or deceitful people, the Stoic goal is not revenge or judgment. It's resilience. We're not here to moralize. We're here to recognize behaviors that betray a corrupted character and prepare ourselves to respond wisely. So let's begin with the first sign. Sign number 1, they come with a new reputation. You probably met someone whose presence seemed off, not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. Their past is whispered about. Their actions have harmed others, and yet they walk into a room with a smile, a story, and a brand new image. This is not coincidence. It's strategy. When a person with a harmful or manipulative nature realizes that you have seen through them, the first thing they often do is not reflect, apologize, or change. Instead, they attempt to rewrite their narrative. They'll shift the story, blame circumstances, spin a tale of misunderstood intentions, or worst of all, weaponize your empathy by presenting themselves as a victim. They do this not to repair anything, but to protect their control, because if the truth is visible to you, it may become visible to others, and their power depends entirely on perception. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But people like this know, if they can change your thoughts, they can distort the color of their own soul in your eyes. So they construct a new version of themselves, polished, relatable, believable. They talk about growth, hard lessons, or false accusations. But this isn't accountability. It's a PR campaign. Their goal is to make you second-guess what you've already felt in your gut. This is where Stoic clarity matters. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminds himself, if someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth, which harms no one. But these individuals don't seek truth. They seek survival. They don't face their wrongdoings. They deflect them, decorate them, and disguise them. You'll often notice this behavior after confrontation. Someone you've distanced yourself from begins showing up again, with a different tone, a different story, maybe even a different circle of people. The rebrand is subtle but intentional. And if you're not grounded in what you already know, it can be confusing. They may talk about therapy, or faith, or personal growth. They might even say things like, "I was in a bad place back then," without ever acknowledging who they hurt or how. This is not humility. It's redirection. In these moments, Stoicism teaches us to stay rooted in discernment. Don't be cruel, but don't be naive. Don't retaliate, but don't forget. Don't assume people can't change. But don't mistake rebranding for rebirth. Genuine change is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It proves itself over time. So when a person begins to show you a new version of themselves right after they realize you've seen the old one, beware. That is not healing. That's camouflage. Sign number 2, they give off strange vibrations. Sometimes the body knows before the brain does. You walk into a room. They're there. They smile. They're polite. They even act normal. But something inside you tightens. A kind of stillness that doesn't feel like peace, but more like tension preparing to snap. This is not paranoia. This is your subconscious alerting you to energetic dissonance, a misalignment between how someone appears and who they truly are. Call it intuition. Call it vibration. Call it the residue of a moral imbalance. The Stoics didn't use the word energy, but they deeply understood human presence. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." But sometimes what disturbs us is not even a thing. It's the unseen undercurrent, the manipulation behind a smile, the cruelty hiding in politeness, the emptiness in their eyes when they say kind words. When malicious individuals know that their cover has been blown, they don't always lash out. Sometimes they become eerily calm, calculated, overly nice, or falsely serene. But you feel it anyway. Their energy shifts. Their vibration becomes disjointed, not because they've changed, but because they're adjusting their mask, and the friction of that deception emits a frequency your instincts pick up on. You may find yourself doubting this sensation. After all, they haven't done anything outwardly wrong in that moment. But Stoicism teaches us not to ignore reality, even when it's subtle. Your discomfort is data. Your nervous system is an ancient instrument of survival. Stoics remind us, your peace comes from how you respond, but it does not mean pretending not to feel. So what do? You observe. You don't attack. You don't react. You witness. You say nothing, but you adjust your distance. You become more conscious of their inconsistencies, how their words don't match their energy, how their presence leaves you drained rather than nourished. These vibrations are a kind of psychological smoke that hints at an internal fire, the fire of manipulation, resentment, or even fear that they're losing control over you. In workplaces, this can show up as someone micromanaging you suddenly. In personal relationships, it may feel like they're hovering over inquiring or overly invested in your emotional state. Not out of concern, but surveillance. This is not connection. It's containment. And the more you resist it, the more they'll amplify this false calm, like a stage actor overperforming serenity while their script falls apart behind the curtain. In these moments, return to the Stoic practice of internal observation. What are you feeling? Is it yours or theirs? And if it's theirs, if it's that strange vibration telling you something's off, listen. The world won't always validate what you sense. But Stoicism reminds us, you don't need external confirmation to trust your inner clarity. Sign number 3, they lie to cover up past lies. Lies do not stand alone. Every lie invites another. And before long, what began as a single act of avoidance becomes an entire architecture of deception, a fragile structure built not with bricks, but with illusions. When someone with malicious intent realizes you've started to see the truth, they rarely stop to come clean. Instead, they work hard to protect the lie. They begin constructing more, weaving storylines, altering details, rewriting events you both witnessed. Their purpose is not just to deceive you, but to make you question your own memory. This is no longer about avoiding blame. It's about controlling the narrative. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." And this is exactly the trap the dishonest fall into, believing that they can sculpt reality with lies instead of facing what is. They don't want truth. They want control. And lies are their scaffolding. Let's say you catch them in a clear contradiction. Something they said yesterday is disproven by something they say today. Rather than acknowledging it, they'll double down. They'll say, "That's not what I meant," or "You misunderstood me," or "That never happened." These aren't clarifications. They're distortions. Part of a broader strategy to make you feel unstable, confused, and hesitant to trust your own perception. At first, these contradictions might seem like memory lapses or emotional reactions. But over time, a pattern emerges. Every inconsistency serves to protect them, not to resolve or heal anything. And if you confront them with evidence, something undeniable, they may not explode. They may just slip away, redirect the topic, or blame a third party. Anything to keep the original lie hidden under newer ones. This is how people become trapped in their own deceit. They lie to avoid a truth they fear. But in doing so, they lose their integrity, their credibility, even their ability to see themselves clearly. And for the person on the receiving end, for you, the damage is real. You begin to ask, did I imagine that? Am I being too harsh? Is it really a lie if they believe it? That's exactly where they want you, in a fog, doubting yourself, not them. Here, Stoic wisdom becomes not just helpful, but essential. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed injustice." This means, while they twist, spin, and fabricate, you stay rooted in clarity. You hold to the facts. You remain grounded in your own moral compass. You do not let the fog of their falsehood cloud your view of what's right. Stoicism doesn't call us to argue with liars. It calls us to recognize what lies do to the soul, how they erode trust, weaken courage, and build prisons that even a liar cannot escape from. So when someone begins stacking lie upon lie, not to protect you, not even to protect themselves from harm, but to protect their control, you can respond with quiet strength. You don't need to win an argument. You don't need to change their mind. You only need to protect your own mind from being twisted into something that no longer sees clearly. Truth is not loud. It doesn't need to be. It simply is. Sign number 4. They only come around when they need something. Perhaps one of the clearest signs of a manipulative or self-centered person is this. They disappear when you struggle and reappear when you've already survived. You may not notice it at first. Their absence feels like distance, not rejection. And their return feels like coincidence, not calculation. But in time, you see the pattern. When they benefit from your energy, your time, your kindness, they're there. When you are in need, emotionally, mentally, or materially, they vanish. They are not companions. They are opportunists. And when they realize you've noticed this, when you no longer offer unconditional access to your presence, they don't reflect. They don't change. They re-engage with intention. They may come back with softness, with apologies, with new language. They may say, "I've missed you," or "I didn't know how to help," or "Things were just so complicated for me." But notice, the return is always timed. They come back after you've stabilized, after you rebuilt what they abandoned. They reappear only when there is something to gain again, not because they care, but because you have something valuable again, your strength. Marcus Aurelius offered this reflection. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. So rather than analyzing their excuses, evaluate their patterns. How often are they around when you're in need? How often do they contribute when there's no obvious return for them? Do they show up when you're down or only when you're useful? In Stoicism, character is not defined by what you say. It's revealed by what you consistently do, especially when there's nothing to gain. Toxic individuals don't serve relationships. They use them. And once they realize you've seen this truth, they will often try to reinsert themselves in your life, not to make amends, but to resume access. And if you say no, if you enforce boundaries, they may become distant, cold, or indifferent, not because they're hurt, but because the benefit has expired. This is painful, especially if this person was once close to you, a friend, a partner, even a family member. But pain does not equal failure. Pain, in this case, is a signal that your perception is sharpening, that your self-respect is protecting you from being used again. And this is where Stoic resilience becomes your anchor. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to explain yourself. You only need to see clearly and act in alignment with your values. You are not cold for withdrawing from those who only show up for your strength, but abandon you in your weakness. You are wise. Let them go, not in anger, but in peace. Their absence is not a loss. It is space. Space you can now fill with people who show up not out of need, but out of genuine connection. Sign number 5. They try to make you feel stupid. Of all the tactics used by those who seek control, few are as quietly cruel as this one. They make you feel stupid. You share something personal, a mistake, a fear, a regret, hoping for empathy, but instead you get smirks, condescension, mocking questions like, "Why would you do that? You didn't see that coming? You're too sensitive." It stings, not because the words are harsh, but because they're designed to undermine your intelligence, your emotional clarity, and your sense of reality. This tactic isn't just emotional carelessness. It's psychological warfare. Making you feel foolish is how they cut you down to size, not physically, but mentally. Because the moment you start doubting your intelligence, they've created space to control your thoughts, decisions, and sense of worth. And they know this. They don't need to yell or insult directly. A subtle tone, a sarcastic laugh, a pause before answering. These are enough to trigger the internal question they want you to ask. Am I the problem? This is where Stoicism becomes your defense. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. In that moment, you have a choice. You can accept the insult, or you can observe it without swallowing it. Because a wise person understands something that malicious individuals often forget. Making someone else feel small does not make you bigger. It reveals your insecurity, not your power. When someone belittles you, it's often not about you at all. It's about how threatened they are by your clarity, your independence, or your refusal to be manipulated. So they resort to insult wrapped in concern. They call it honesty, just being real, or tough love. But Stoicism reminds us, true love does not humiliate. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. So when someone tries to mock or diminish you, the Stoic response is not to argue or retaliate. It's to remain unmoved, to recognize that someone's unkind words don't define your worth. Your response does. You don't need to prove your intelligence. You don't need to explain your mistakes. You only need to know this. You are still learning, still growing, and you don't owe anyone performance of perfection. What malicious individuals want is your self-doubt. They want your confusion. Because once they have that, they can shape your decisions to fit their needs. So if you ever hear that voice, internal or external, trying to convince you that you're foolish, pause and ask, is this voice helping me grow? Or is it trying to keep me small? Because growth never comes from shame, and wisdom is never earned by being ridiculed. In a world full of manipulation, holding firm to your self-respect is not pride, it's protection. Sign number 6. They pretend not to know what they are. Perhaps one of the most disorienting tactics of a toxic or manipulative person is this. They act like they don't know what they're doing. You call them out on a boundary they've crossed, and they look surprised. You bring up a pattern of hurtful behavior, and they claim confusion. You express how their actions made you feel, and they respond with questions like, what do you mean? Why didn't you say anything earlier? Are you sure you're not overreacting? They pretend to be clueless. But make no mistake, this is not forgetfulness. This is strategic ignorance. By claiming they didn't know they hurt you, they accomplish 2 things. 1, they avoid responsibility. 2, they shift the burden onto you. Now, instead of discussing their behavior, you're defending your feelings. You're explaining why you were upset. You're trying to justify your reaction while they sit back, acting innocent. This tactic is subtle but effective, and it's a form of emotional gaslighting, designed to blur the lines between what happened and what didn't, between what you experienced and what they claim to have intended. Epictetus reminds us, if someone does wrong, it's because they think it's right. No one knowingly does wrong. But here's the catch. Stoicism also teaches discernment. Some people genuinely make mistakes. They unintentionally hurt others. But when a person repeats the same patterns, despite having been told how it affects you, it's no longer ignorance. It's avoidance. They do know what they're doing. They just don't want to admit it, because admitting it would mean accepting blame, and that would cost them control. So they pretend, they play the victim. They say things like, you're making me feel like a bad person, or I can't believe you'd think I do that on purpose. These words twist the conversation. Now you're the one who feels guilty. You're the one apologizing. And slowly, the truth gets buried. under emotion, confusion, and misplaced shame. Stoic philosophy offers clarity in this moment. When someone refuses to own their actions, they are not innocent, they are irresponsible. You don't need their confession to trust what you experienced. You don't need their validation to confirm what you felt. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." And what could be more insane than allowing someone else's false innocence to rewrite your truth? You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. And you don't need to re-explain reality to someone who refuses to live in it. Let them pretend. Let them act as if your clarity is confusion. You do not need to convince them of who they are. You only need to remember who you are and what you saw, heard, and felt. Because when someone repeatedly says they don't know what they're doing, what they're really saying is, "I don't want to be accountable." And that's not your burden to carry. Sign number 7. They try to manipulate you. When all else fails, when their lies unravel, their reputation crumbles, and their victimhood no longer works. The final tactic toxic individuals use is manipulation. Manipulation isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with threats or ultimatums. In fact, it often comes disguised as kindness. They offer help. They show concern. They listen attentively. But behind that gentle tone is not compassion, it's calculation, because a manipulator's goal is simple. Control your behavior without you realizing it. And how do they do this? By identifying your weaknesses, your fears, your insecurities, your hopes, and your need for love or approval. Then, slowly, they position themselves as the one person who can soothe those wounds. They say things like, "You can always count on me. I'm the only one who truly understands you. Without me, you'd be lost." These words sound caring, but in reality, they're emotional anchors weighing you down and keeping you tethered to someone who does not have your best interest at heart. Stoic philosophy warns us, he who is enslaved by emotion loses his reason. Manipulation thrives where clarity is absent. When you're unsure of yourself, when you're emotionally vulnerable, you are easier to influence. That's why manipulators never empower you. They don't want you strong. They don't want you healed. They want you dependent. They'll say things that make you second-guess your decisions. They'll act disappointed when you assert boundaries. They may even play the martyr. "I do so much for you, and this is how you treat me." It's all part of the plan, to make you feel guilty for protecting your peace, to confuse self-respect with selfishness. But here's what Stoicism teaches us, and what manipulators fear the most. True strength comes from within, and true happiness is rooted in freedom of the mind. No one can make you do anything without your consent, and no amount of guilt, pressure, or sweet-sounding words can override your power unless you allow it. The Stoic response to manipulation is not to argue, plead, or explain. It is to stay anchored in reason. Ask yourself, do their actions match their words? Do I feel stronger around this person or smaller? Am I free to be myself, or do I walk on eggshells? Because the moment you begin to question their grip on your mind, the spell starts to break. And when you enforce boundaries, firmly, calmly, without drama, you reclaim your power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Let that be your guide. The manipulator will resist. They will escalate. They will try one last time to confuse you. Because control is their oxygen, but you don't need to fight them. Just remove their hand from your life. Silently, clearly, completely, not to punish them, but to protect your mind, your values, your choices, your life. That is the Stoic way. Final thoughts. A Stoic path through darkness. Evil is not always monstrous. It does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it looks ordinary. Sometimes it smiles. And that's why recognizing it is so difficult, but so necessary. Through these signs, we see the tools evil people use when they sense we discovered who they are. They reinvent their reputation. They send strange, unsettling energy. They lie, then lie again. They only show up when they need something. They make you question your intelligence. They act like they're innocent. And finally, They manipulate your emotions to regain control. Each of these behaviors is a signal, a sign that you are dealing with someone whose intentions are not aligned with goodness, growth, or truth. And yet, the Stoics would remind us, they are still human. They are not demons. They are people who have chosen a destructive path. People ruled by fear, pride, insecurity, and ignorance. But just because we understand them doesn't mean we must accept their actions. Compassion does not mean tolerating harm. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. The behavior of others, their lies, their tactics, their manipulation is not within our control. But what is in our control is how we respond, how we protect our energy, how we refuse to be drawn into cycles of harm. You don't need to yell, prove, argue, or convince. You only need to stay clear, still, rooted, because your calmness, your refusal to react, is not weakness. It is your greatest strength. And when you walk away from those who wish to control you, you are not abandoning them. You are returning to yourself. So now I want to ask you, have you ever experienced any of these signs from someone in your life? If so, how did you handle it? And how did it change the way you see others and yourself? Let us know in the comments. By sharing your story, you may help someone else recognize the signs and take their first step toward freedom. And if this video resonated with you, consider supporting the channel by liking, sharing, or subscribing. Your support helps us continue making content rooted in wisdom, philosophy, and personal growth. Check out our other videos on Stoicism, healing from toxic relationships, and reclaiming your peace. They're linked on the screen and in the description. Until next time, keep your mind clear, your heart steady, and your soul anchored in truth.